country he's president of now, I don't know if Saint's the country he was elected in, but I will say that he was elected in a country that was, among other things, looking for redemption, and looking for redemption from a lot of different things. Redemption from the Bush presidency, redemption from our past, you know, uncovered like this piece that fell off this fountain. And there's a way in which Black people in the United States have represented the possibility and the conduits for redemption. And I think that was a very powerful force in what made people say, you know, this is the guy we should elect.
I think building on that idea, the fact that he is of two races and of two countries adds to his ability to be redemptive, and he's the kind of bringing together the things that were asunder, Black and white in this country. I don't believe it, but I think that he has come to symbolize that.
And maybe the country that he is now president of was not really seeking redemption. What I feel is that what's come to the fore is a lot of clarity around what was rarely spoken. I think myself, maybe many others, have been very surprised at the ugliness that has been unearthed. And it was allowed to be unnamed for a long time. But now, because Obama is president, it has given some people permission to do things that I think even 50 years ago would have been surprising, would have been outlandish.
One of the things that hasn't changed is the mythology, and I say white supremacist mythology. It hasn't changed, and every day kids still are taught from elementary school up to high school that Columbus discovered America. That one mythology after another, or that the Alamo, the people who died at the Alamo, were freedom fighters and were seeking independence, when in fact they were trying to establish a slave empire within the confines of Mexico. But these racialized mythologies have never gone away. And because they've never gone away, there exists within the subconscious of many whites, not all whites, but many whites, this background knowledge which is steeped in racism. And as a result of this foundation that has been laid, which is very strongly Eurocentric, it's white history without being called white history, so they don't get in trouble for it. But we are all expected to embrace it as if it were fact. And so this is the mythology that lies in the back of the minds of people, particularly what I call the base. And the base means the people, the general population who have limited critical thinking skills, maybe just a high school diploma, but that base is the ones who are propagandized the most in any society. And as a result of that propaganda, it is then easy for whoever wants to bring forth racism and then have a ready-made audience to chime into it. And so I think that that's what we're seeing, something that has never gone away, that has always been there, at least from you know, I like to call it a verbal superstructure. When people pass on from one generation to the next that African Americans are inferior or Mexican Americans are inferior, then this becomes the norm. And it always lies just below the surface, and it can be pulled up like bubbling water in a boiling pot at the command of anyone seeking to racialize an issue. And this is what I think is not surprising to me, because it's never gone away. It's always been there. Columbus discovered America. And if you look at statistics, and I would encourage you all to look at the Southern Poverty Law Center's website, if you look at the statistics of the proliferation of hate groups we now have the largest rise in hate groups in American history. We have more hate groups now than we've ever had. By the way, Texas has 66, ranging from Aryan Nation to honor and blood to a clan and so forth. Texas, I believe, is either first or second in the number of hate groups that exist within its borders. So nothing, in my mind, has changed except for the legal aspects. It's illegal to discriminate. And de facto, though, is still very much in force. And anytime someone wants to bring a racist agenda forward, they can do that and yeast up the mob. It reminds me of the cowboy days, when you got a bunch of people outside of the jail hollering for the lynching of the person inside. And that one person or two people can yeast up the mob, as in the case of what they're doing to Barack Obama, and yeast up that mob because they have that in the back of their psyche that he shouldn't be president to begin with.
I think that there's this shroud of class, not exactly consciousness, but of class politics that is kind of tamping down race politics at this moment. And so when you're talking about this base structure, it's also a kind of class-based, economics-based structure that one assumes education will change, that this is a meritocracy, that regardless of color, of place, that one can rise to the top. And of course we have Barack Obama who did in fact do that. But the facts are that most of us can't do that. And he happens to be one of a very limited minority of people, regardless of their color, of their gender, that can actually move that far. And so, in my mind, what the idea of post-race does is to kind of whitewash racial identity, racial politics, and why it continues to matter, and to shroud it with a kind of class consciousness or a class identity that seems to be mattering more to people, when in fact it should matter simultaneously.
In 2008, we watched the young Barack Obama declare the possibility of a new era in this country. For me, it seems that what America did was it elected a president that actually the entire world embraced, in a way that, being here now, and we've not been here that long, I rarely meet people who are born and bred in this country who have a sense of how profound his presidency, or the promise of his presidency, what it meant to the rest of us outside of him. All the more why, I think just a few months ago perhaps, when we witnessed the president of the US have to make public statements around his citizenship. And that it was one of those surreal moments in time that would be utterly impossible to imagine happening almost anywhere else in the world. And particularly surreal because in many respects the story that America was telling itself, and perhaps still does, and certainly the rest of the world, is that he's the kind of icon, he's the embodiment of the iconic figure around the notion of post-race. And yet, he is required to prove his right, not obviously to the office, but even his right of citizenship. And so this, it's still shocking to me, I have to say. And I think it's safe to say for many people around the world. And so the kind of country that he presides over, in my mind, has, in many respects, is a country in deep trouble. Because I'm from South Africa, and I see the signs every day. And the signs tell me that that if people are not vigilant and do not fight back, I mean, I didn't see massive protests. I did not see people in the streets when the what do they call them, the birthers required the president of your country to declare him or to prove his right of citizenship. I didn't see people in the streets, and that actually worries me the most, because what it means is that anything could happen from here on out. Yes.
To me, that is the problem with the label post-racial. It allows people not to deal with race. If we adopt a notion that the United States has moved into a post-racial time, then anything that happens that is related to race will never be named as such. And the nation then will not have an opportunity to fully examine the racial mess that we continue to be in. It's like if you don't examine something, you simply replicate it, you continue with it. So I get very frightened by the term post-racial, because I think it allows for us to continue with a kind of blindness and no space to say that a racist incident has occurred or that racist ideology is at play. Because if you're post-racial, then you're the paranoid person who is pulling something out of a hat or making something out of nothing. So I find the term really very dangerous.
And so apartheid, which embodies the legal infrastructure of white supremacy, ended in 1994. And being filmmakers and activists in that space, suddenly we could not be black. We could not name ourselves, because the moment we say we're black, we're being racist. And so that, everything gets flipped, because now you're expected, and of course, with the end of apartheid is an assumption that racism has ended. And I think that's where, clearly in South Africa, however many years later, I can't calculate, but 16, we've actually gone through several changes, but the biggest one is the pressure to move on. When the wounds are still open, when the hurt is still deep, we have to move on, forget about it, because we have to race towards this rainbow nation. And what happens is, being a person of color, you have to reconcile yourself to white supremacy instead of calling it what it is.